For much of the 19th and 20th centuries, having an Astor in your family tree was like having a passport to the upper echelons of American society. Indeed, even today, you can find traces of the Astor name adorned on some of the cornerstones of culture in the United States. You can spend a few days lounging luxuriously at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, grab a coffee in the morning in Bryant Park, next to the Astor-constructed New York Public Library, and enjoy a sumptuous meal at a swanky restaurant on Astor Place in Lower Manhattan. And yet behind the polished veneer of their historic legacy lies a story of division and disparity. As the mammoth Astor fortune split into two distinct branches on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, the contrast between the thriving and the struggling descendants has become striking. On one side, the 21st century Astors revel in a world of continued political and financial influence, their lives a vibrant perpetuation of their storied past. Meanwhile, across the ocean, some descendants face a tragic reversal, growing up in relative poverty, according to them, and picking up the pieces of life in their words, cash-poor struggle. In today's episode, we'll give you the full, unedited saga of life in the 21st century as a member of the original old money family of the transatlantic jet set, exposing the good, the bad, and the luxury, as we describe, what happened to the remaining Astor family heirs. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of exactly where the 21st century Astor descendants are today, we have to give a bit of context, since this family is, these days, uniquely positioned on two sides of the Atlantic Ocean, in the United Kingdom and the United States. Even more interestingly, the family itself first started in neither of these countries. You see, John Jacob Astor, the first patriarch of this financial dynasty, bid adieu to his native German countryside and set foot on American soil in 1783 with little more than a dream and a penchant for fur. Thus, his subsequent early ventures into the fur trade not only padded his pockets, but also sharpened his business instincts, paving his path towards real estate and various other lucrative enterprises. By the end of his days in 1848, John Jacob had forever written his name in the pages of history as America's first multimillionaire, and the baton of wealth was then passed on to his offspring, who were no slouches in amplifying this burgeoning fortune. William Backhouse Astor Sr., his son and successor, took to the New York real estate market like a duck to water, further bloating the family coffers. But the family's affluence wasn't just confined to business ledger sheets, they were also a fixture in the high society pages, with iconic women in the family, such as the legendary Mrs. Caroline Schermerhorn Astor, arguably creating the old money versus new money framing we still use today. Yet, as the Astors' fame and wealth cemented them as American royalty, they simultaneously began to stitch their family fabric with that of British nobility through strategic intermarriage, thus beginning the split branches of the modern Astor family we'll be discussing today. Indeed, in a Gilded Age marriage market as opulent as their lifestyles, the Astors and their ilk found matrimonial matches across the Atlantic, embedding themselves into the British aristocracy. But this trend was hardly an Astor-only thing. Numerous American heiresses, the so-called dollar princesses, crossed the ocean to marry cash-strapped but title-rich British aristocrats. And often, these unions were less about romantic moonlight and roses, and more about cold, hard cash and social ladders. Take Consuelo Vanderbilt, for instance, who in 1895 found herself the Duchess of Marlborough, not so much through a whirlwind romance, but thanks to her hefty dowry, which propped up the sagging fortunes of Blenheim Palace. In fact, it is through this infusion of Vanderbilt funds that, arguably, Britain was lucky enough to have none other than Sir Winston Churchill as Prime Minister. You see, Churchill himself was in Blenheim in 1874, grandchild to the 7th Duke and cousin to Consuelo's Duke. Quickly, Consuelo Vanderbilt herself and young Winston developed a deep camaraderie, and amidst the opulent yet stifling social life of the American heiress's aristocratic duties, Consuelo found a genuine friend in Churchill. Winston often visited Blenheim Palace, and Consuelo found solace in his companionship, especially through the strains of an arranged marriage. However, more consequentially to our discussion, Consuelo's marriage produced 2 sons, ensuring that Winston Churchill did not become the Duke of Marlborough, and allowing him the freedom to focus on his political career. Despite her eventual separation and divorce from the Duke, Consuelo and Churchill remained friends, and she continued to be a part of his social circle. Thus, Consuelo Vanderbilt's marriage to the Duke of Marlborough not only directly impacted the history of wealthy Americans marrying into the British aristocracy, but freed up the war-torn Brits to have their most legendary Prime Minister ever. It is therefore within this broader context that the Astors continued to thrive on both sides of the Atlantic. For example, William Waldorf Astor waved goodbye to the New World in 1890, donned the cap of British nobility, and bagged the title of the first Viscount Astor. Even the tragic demise of John Jacob Astor IV on the Titanic in 1912 did little to sink the family's influence. If anything, it marked a new chapter where the American and British branches of the family pursued their own distinct legacies. In America, Vincent Astor, the inheritor of the Astor estate post-Titanic, took up the philanthropic mantle, leaving his mark on New York City's skyline and social fabric. His death in 1959, however, dimmed the family's luminary status in America. Meanwhile, across the pond, the British Astors were having a bit of a renaissance, as we'll see in a minute. With that larger backstory in our grasp, we can now begin our update on the 21st century Astors on both sides of the Atlantic, and towards the end, you're in for a bit of a surprise, for the Astor bloodline even extends all the way to the frosty lands of Russia. With that all said, let us begin our journey with the more well-known and influential remaining Astors, currently helmed in the United Kingdom. First, within the gilded corridors of British aristocracy, William Astor, the fourth Viscount Astor, navigates his role as a conservative hereditary Lord Temporal with a blend of charm and controversy. Born in 1951, his tenure in the House of Lords is a mix of old-school grace and occasional eyebrow-raising maneuvers. And Astor's political and business acumen have earned him respect, but not without criticism. The whispers of antiquated privilege follow him closely, especially with King Charles III's recent efforts to modernize the peerage system, raising questions as recently as this year about whether Astor will resist or adapt to these evolving aristocratic norms. Furthermore, in classic family fashion, the fourth Viscount Astor merged two powerful lineages when he married to Annabel Lucy Veronica Jones in 1976. Annabel, previously married to a baronet, brought her daughter Samantha into the Astor family, intertwining their heritage with British politics through Samantha's marriage to former Prime Minister David Cameron. And although the question arises whether Viscount Astor offers political advice during family meals, or merely enjoys the company, the marriage certainly speaks to the continuing influence of the family, as an Astor is also the stepfather of a recent Prime Minister. Now, Astor and Annabel's children, Flora Catherine, William Waldorf IV, and James Jacob Jake, each engage with their aristocratic legacy in distinct ways, all continuing the Astor name over in Britain through the millennial generation. Flora maintains a low profile, focusing on her family. Will navigates the expectations of inheritance while looking ahead, and Jake balances tradition with forging his own path. Our second major British Astor patriarch is none other than John Jacob Johnny Astor, the 8th, 3rd Baron Astor of Hever, born in 1946. Educated at Eton College and with a background in the Life Guards, his early experiences spanned from London to Malaysia and Hong Kong, and his political career gained prominence after the House of Lords Act of 1999, which reduced the hereditary peers but allowed him to retain his seat. As Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Ministry of Defence from 2010 to 2015, he demonstrated his capability beyond ceremonial roles. But it was his son and heir apparent, Charles Gavin John Astor, joining in marriage with Princess Eliane Marie Ghislain de Merode of Belgium in June 2017, that was a fairy tale event at Hever Castle, adding a royal dimension to the Astor lineage. Princess Eliane, daughter of Prince Leonel and Countess Regine of Liedekerk, introduced a continental flair, enhancing the Astor family's aristocratic credentials. And their children, Astrid Henriette Elizabeth, born in 2020, and Lily Rose, born in 2023, signify a continued blending of historic and influential lines, as well as being notable Generation Alpha members of the Astor family. Furthermore, the fourth Viscount's grandson, Charles John Astor, known as Charlie or Sharky, and born in 1982, represents a youthful side of the current family. A great-great-grandson of William Waldorf Astor, Charlie's media spotlight was notably due to his past romantic link with Pippa Middleton. Besides media attention, he co-runs Sharky and George, a children's entertainment company with high-profile clientele, and holds a Guinness World Record for a pantomime horse, reflecting his whimsical side. And then there's Rose Nancy Langhorne Astor, daughter of David Astor of Jupiter Asset Management and Classic FM, further reinforces the Astor family's elite status through her marriage to Hugh Van Cutsem. You see, the Van Cutsem family has long been preeminent in British high society, with deep ties to the British Crown. For example, Hugh Van Cutsem's father, Hugh Bernard Edward Van Cutsem, was a close friend of King Charles III, a relationship that began during their university days at Cambridge, and this connection has been maintained across generations. Furthermore, their daughter, Grace Emily Clare Van Cutsem, notably served as a bridesmaid at Prince William and Kate Middleton's royal wedding in 2011. And Grace, who is also the goddaughter of Prince William, became a memorable figure at the event, famously dubbed the Grumpy Bridesmaid due to her forlorn expression during the couple's balcony kiss. But we would be remiss to not also mention Harry Marcus George Lopes, born into the Astor and Lopes families, embodying notable heritage and connections. His family's distinguished history includes ancestors such as Massey Lopes, 2nd Baron Roberot, and Sephardi Jews like Judah Manasseh Lopes. Harry's marriage to Laura Rose Parker Bowles, daughter of Andrew Parker Bowles and the current Queen Camilla, introduces another royal dimension to the current British Astors. Therefore, as you can see, the Astors on Albion are moving from strength to strength, interweaving their bloodlines with the very peak of British influence and popping out heirs like it's going out of style. However, lest we forget, the Astor name really got its footing over in the homeland of our colonial cousins, the US of A. To start off, let's first mention an American Astor in-law who only recently passed away, but held immense influence in high society, but also had a child who brought a bit of infamy to the extended family. You see, it all starts with the stepfather of Brooke Astor, William Vincent Astor, an American businessman and philanthropist who was born as the elder child of the legendary John Jacob Astor IV and wealthy heiress Ava Lowell Willing. Young Vincent's life took a dramatic turn in 1912 when his father died on the Titanic, leaving Vincent with an enormous fortune and making him one of the wealthiest individuals of his time. After serving valiantly in World War I, Vincent became chairman and chief stockholder of Newsweek magazine in 1937, when the magazine was based in the iconic Knickerbocker building, a structure his father had built. Vincent remained its principal owner until his death in 1959, before the Washington Post Company acquired a controlling stake in Newsweek from the Vincent Astor Foundation for $8 million in 1961. Interestingly, family biographer Derek Wilson described Vincent Astor as a unique figure in America, a wealthy Astor with a profound social conscience. For instance, at 20, after inheriting his fortune, Vincent left Harvard University and sought to reshape the family's image from aloof slum landlords to socially conscious benefactors. Now, in October 1953, Vincent married one Roberta Brooke Russell, a twice-married woman who became a prominent philanthropist, socialite, and author. Born on the 30th of March 1902, Brooke Astor's early life, influenced by her father's military career, fostered her love for art and literature, and her education, though unconventional, set the stage for her future achievements. Then, she first married J. Dryden Cuser at 16, entered influential circles, and began her literary career. After their divorce in 1930, she moved to New York City, where she excelled in philanthropy and writing, and her second marriage to Charles Marshall in 1932 expanded her global travels and literary work. But it was Brooke's marriage to Vincent Astor in 1953 that positioned her at the forefront of philanthropy, as she led the Vincent Astor Foundation and directed around $195 million to charitable causes. Her contributions earned her significant honors, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the National Medal of Arts. And, although not being technically of Astor stock, adding a continuing sheen of prestige to her in-laws' family name well into the late 20th century. Additionally, she authored novels and autobiographies reflecting her lifestyle and values, but her later years were tainted by scandal involving her son, Anthony Dryden Marshall. You see, Anthony Dryden Marshall, born in 1924, was Brooke's only child with J. Dryden Cuser, and his varied career included roles as a Marine Corps officer, U.S. consul, ambassador, CIA officer, and Broadway producer. However, his life was marred by scandal when his son Philip accused him of mistreating and exploiting Brooke. The ensuing trial revealed troubling details, leading to Marshall's conviction for grand larceny and conspiracy. Therefore, Marshall's personal life, including 3 challenging marriages, further complicated his mother's legacy, however briefly. Yet Brooke Astor must be noted in our discussion as perhaps the most notable American in-law in recent years. But parallel to Marshall's story is that of Ivan Sergeyevich Obolensky, a direct descendant of Titanic's John Jacob Astor IV, born in May 1925 in London. As we promised in the beginning, this is the Russian connection, if you will, for the Astor lineage. You see, Ivan's father, Prince Sergei Platonovich Obolensky, was a notable figure whose life story reads like a historical novel. Born in 1890 in Tsarskoye Selo, Russia, Sergei was part of the illustrious Obolensky family, which traced its lineage back to the Rurikid rulers of Kievan Rus, predating the Romanov emperors. In other words, one could argue that Ivan comes from the founding stock of modern Russia, along with being an actual Astor descendant. Therefore, Igor's father's early life was marked by the grandeur of Tsarist Russian society. He was educated at Oxford University, where he played polo and joined the exclusive Bullingdon Club. However, his life took a dramatic turn during the Russian Revolution, and as a cavalry officer, he fought against the Bolsheviks and eventually fled Russia, escaping the chaos that ensued. After leaving Russia, Sergei married one Ava Alice Muriel Astor, Igor's mother, the daughter of John Jacob Astor IV in 1924, consequently creating a marriage that symbolized the union of Russian nobility with American high society. Sergei himself later became an American entrepreneur and served as vice chairman of Hilton Hotels Corporation. In addition, he had a distinguished military career, serving as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. paratroopers during World War II and working with the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. Furthermore, following in the Astor legacy, Ivan's career itself was distinguished, including co-founding the publishing house McDowell Obolensky Incorporated, which published James Agee's Pulitzer Prize-winning A Death in the Family. He married Claire Elizabeth McGinnis in 1949, fathering 3 children, living Astor descendants, before divorcing in 1956. And his second marriage to Mary Elizabeth Morris in 1959 produced another son, yet another direct descendant as well. But perhaps it is Alexandra Aldrich, the 5th great-granddaughter of John Jacob Astor, who has added the most intrigue to the American Astor lineage in the last 5 years. You see, by the time of her upbringing in the 1980s, for Alexandra, the golden era of the American Astors had long since faded, leaving behind only echoes of past grandeur within the walls of Rokeby, the family's 43-room estate in Barrytown, New York.
Everyone in my neighborhood assumed that we were aristocrats and wealthy because I was raised in a mansion, and I really grew up extremely poor.
And this once majestic mansion, a pinnacle of American Gothic architecture, had devolved into a crumbling monument to lost wealth and neglected heritage. Thus, in her eyes, Rokeby served as both playground and prison for young Alexandra. And this once majestic mansion, a pinnacle of American Gothic architecture, had devolved into a crumbling monument to lost wealth and neglected heritage. On one hand, the sprawling 420-acre property, complete with woods and outbuildings, offered ample space for childhood adventures. However, the mansion itself told a different story, and its 40-foot-long hallways, adorned with heirlooms and opulent furnishings, led to rooms filled with dust-covered antiques and the unmistakable scent of decay. Furthermore, Alexandra's parents, particularly her father Ricky, played a significant role in shaping her unconventional childhood. Ricky, despite his Harvard education and privileged background, worked as Rokeby's unpaid handyman. According to her, his strong sense of entitlement clashed with the family's financial reality, resulting in a household where TV dinners discarded by a nearby pie factory often served as meals. It was therefore within these halls that Alexandra penned The Astor Orphan, a memoir that peeled back the veneer of wealth to reveal a tableau of dysfunction and financial precarity. Published in 2013, The Astor Orphan offers a window into an upbringing defined by contrasts. The estate, though grand in scale and rich in history, was shackled by financial limitations so severe that the family was often described as land-rich but cash-poor. Alexandra's narrative is not one of lavish soirees and silk gowns, but of a 10-year-old navigating a labyrinth of familial chaos, with an unemployed father and a grandmother mired in alcoholism. Her account, lauded for its stark honesty, presents a family fractured yet clinging to the vestiges of a distinguished name. And thus, in a way, we see a tale of two families within the living Astor descendants. In the United Kingdom, we have a thriving, prosperous and bountiful branch, intermarrying and creating a much longer bloodline. The American Astors, however, have had a bit of a mixed bag, teetering between maintaining an opulent lifestyle with a storied name and on the brink of financial ruin. And now, we'd like to see you in the comments. Which descendants of a legendary old money family would you like us to feature next? We love making videos based directly on your suggestions, so don't be shy and leave us your thoughts. With that said, thanks for joining us for another episode, and cheers until next time.